Hey folks, Rob here from the Air Combat Sim podcast. Today I'm joined with Dan Hall, who I met at the Flight Sim Expo in June. And much to my dismay, we've had a number of life issues and then technical issues that are causing us to record this episode again. But I have to say, I was really impressed when I ran into Dan there and got to take a look at the products. But who better to tell you about them than Dan? Dan, will you give yourself a little bit of an intro and then tell us about Heads Up View?
Sure. Thanks, Rob, for having me. My name is Dan Hall. I'm the founder of Heads Up View LLC. And a little bit about my background. I'm a senior radio frequency technician with one of the largest defense contractors in the world. And I specialize in tuning satellite components and have about 20 years experience in the industry. Passion for flight simulation started pretty much when desktop computers hit the market, in about the 90s, and have followed all the software and simulation platforms since then. So, about 10 or 15 years ago, in one of my cockpit builds, I decided I needed a heads-up display. And since there wasn't anything on the market, I taught myself all about heads-up displays, optic systems, and designed my first prototype literally about 15 years ago. And what you see here is the end result of that research and knowledge after having decided to offer something like what I had to the market beginning earlier this year.
Can you
And we
talk a little bit
focused.
about the, what is that, a cat?
Yep.
That's fantastic. Can you talk a little bit about the research that you did to, how did you start? How did you go, hey, I want to do this, and then get motivated to actually build out the product yourself?
Well, it began with a lot of internet research, looking into heads-up displays, how they function. I was able to locate some good documentation on heads-up displays with respect to flight simulators,
Yeah.
and learned through empirical measurements. So I spent quite a bit of time actually playing with optics, with lenses of various magnification strengths, and with mirror assemblies and source images such as projectors, LCD monitors, and things like that. And so in the end, I was able to come up with a recipe that works ideally with a flight simulation environment where your main screen is only a few feet away or even closer.
So, Dan, one of the things that we see a big trend in is immersion. How does the heads-up display help folks get deeper into the experience?
So that is the primary question with why we're producing heads-up displays, Rob. So typically the users are used to a simulated HUD on their main monitor. So what we do is we create a truly immersive and realistic experience by removing that heads-up display image from their main monitor and putting it in an optic system, which
Ooh,
creates the HUD hologram. And
yep.
this reproduces what it's like in a real fighter jet.
Yep, very cool. I mean, and as we're seeing with a lot of the peripherals that are coming around today, whether it happens to be the MFDs or even with the F-15E throttle that I just tested, it's got a vibration. So the immersion is continuing to evolve. It's very cool.
Absolutely. The especially for those who are pushing the immersion to the limit and building cockpits. So again, a lot of our customers prefer the cockpit version. Uh, they've got a real heads-up display system.
Mhm.
The optics are just like the real deal, and you're separating that simulated HUD from your main monitor again, and you're putting it where it's supposed to be.
Gotcha. And so how long have you had this as far as your personal rig? So you've had it for about ten years or so personally?
Little over 10 years, and that prototype HUD went through a few iterations and improvements over the years.
So what triggered you to take this to market?
The fact that nobody was offering heads-up displays. Uh, Honestly, I'm surprised that here it is, a little over 10 years later, and if you do a comprehensive search, you'll find that there is no real affordable option for the flight sim enthusiast. And so that really was the trigger, realizing that it was time to get something to the market that the flight sim enthusiast could afford. And so the goal was to create um, heads-up displays, genuine functional heads-up displays for flight simulation, and make them accessible to the flight sim community, and that means affordable.
Hmm. So, so did it take much time from going from the time that you decided to take this to market to go, okay, now I really feel like I have a good product that has a good product market fit from a standpoint in terms of price, performance, and then actually meeting the software integration points?
Great question. It actually took over 6 months of design work on the two models that we see here. Uh, Basically, Rob, I realized that we had to create a product that two types of users would need. One would be your desktop pilot. You got a desktop scenario, limited real estate, you've got
Yep.
a gaming monitor. We would need a HUD that would work in that environment. And then
Yep.
the other model would be the cockpit version for cockpit builders. So basically, in the desktop scenario, you've got a monitor that's very close.
Mhm.
In a cockpit situation, it's going to be maybe a few feet away. And so I realized that we would need something in a design that accommodated both situations. And that's what we have here with a desktop model. It's called a DT1. And then we've got a cockpit model, and this is the SC1.
Very
But
cool. Now, do you see today whether is one product, do you see you're selling one product more than another?
definitely the cockpit version. So what we found out is the more serious flight sim enthusiast who's really going for something beyond a desktop setup. Those are the guys who, not just guys, but those are the people who are interested in heads-up displays primarily. So these are more popular, the cockpit version.
So, and one of the things we were talking about earlier is that since the Flight Sim Expo, you had actually seen some interest of folks, and we can dive deeper into the existing platforms that you work with today. But there was actually a request for a specific type of heads-up display. What was that?
Yes, we actually had quite a few requests at the Houston Expo for commercial airline simulator HUDs like the 737, 787. I believe there are a couple other aircraft like Learjets and maybe another couple that actually do have a heads up display system. There's a huge difference in these. And the primary difference is that they actually are a cabin ceiling mount
Mhm.
versus something like this that mounts on the top of your dashboard right behind the dash visor. So what we've done since the show is we've started developing a commercial airline heads-up display for simulators. And this is a ceiling mount. We just tested our second prototype yesterday in a 737 simulator here in Littleton, Colorado.
Very cool. So, how close are you to having that third version to market?
Well, we learned a lot over the past two prototypes. The biggest challenge, Rob, is trying to deal with a very odd geometry. So,
Mm.
in the ceiling of a commercial airliner, it slopes from front to back, and it's also curved, and it also slopes from left to right. So, we have a very interesting shape to deal with. So, just mounting prototypes in a very tight space and
Yep.
in an odd geometry are the biggest challenge that we're realizing as we try these prototypes out. But we were able to get good imaging success yesterday, and so that's the long answer to your question. It's going to be many months before we're ready with an actual product that's ready for the market.
No, I appreciate taking the time to get it right. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so when it comes down to the different flight sims that the products work with, which ones are available today?
So we offer hardware, well, versus software. So what we've done is, because these are a plug and play add-on monitor to your operating system, they'll work with a multitude of flight simulation platforms. So they work currently with Prepare 3D, all versions, including the newest version 6 that just came out, and Falcon BMS tested
Mhm.
with the latest version of 4.37 that does utilize MFD extractor, which is a utility that comes with
Mm.
that software. We also work with DCS World, very popular with fighter jet style, simulations, and a perfect match for a heads-up display like you see here. We provide LUA files for DCS so that you can extract the HUD on the T-45, the F-14B, and also the F-18C. And we're working on other aircraft for DCS World, like the F-15, A-10, and those are under development. We'll provide the LUA files once those are ready. We do post them on our website with the setup instructions. And then Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, currently we're working with the F-18. And that's the only aircraft we're aware of that you can actually pop out that HUD and move it to our internal
Mm.
monitor. And that's the only one we're aware of at the moment. Um, and then let's see, I know I'm missing one. It's compatible with FSX
Mhm.
and Flight Sim 9, so some of the older FS software and acceleration. And we also are working with a company to develop a plugin for X-Plane. It's
Got
not
it.
ready, it's in the early stages of development. Basically, it's an X-Plane plugin. You'll be allowed to, it'll enable you to export that HUD
Mhm.
to another monitor on your system, which is what our HUDs are. They're optics systems with internal monitors that create a holographic display for your HUD image.
So one of the questions that probably comes up quite a bit is, well, what about the heads-up display that I already see in my software?
So you would want to turn that off, and there are various methods within each simulator to do that. Um, FSX, Prepare 3D, a lot of them, you simply undock or pop out that HUD, and as soon as you move it to our monitor, it no longer exists on the actual main screen.
Yep.
Um, DCS World, we remove it from the Alt F1 view for you. So when we extract that HUD and put it on ours,
Mhm.
the Alt F1 view is clear of your dashboard, a 2D dashboard, and a
Yep.
2D HUD image. That way you're not looking at two HUDs, which wouldn't be accurate.
Yep. Yep. No, I'm with you. So, and then as far as, you got great feedback from the expo, and now you've turned your sights onto the 737. So you're working on that. Do you have other things that you're working on in terms other different models or things on your roadmap that are top of mind?
Yeah, there's a number of things. Thanks to feedback from our followers, we have implemented already the option on our website so that when users or when customers order these, they can
Hmm.
actually select the type of HUD glass that they prefer. So if you prefer an F-16 HUD glass,
Hmm.
it's got an arc shaped cut to it, just like in an F-16.
Oh,
And then
gotcha.
here we have examples of the faceted F-18 style,
Mm.
and then we offer an A-10 style, which is kind of rectangular. So that was one of the things that we implemented pretty early on. And then we're working on smaller enclosures. So a lot of the pit builders,
Hmm.
uh, they love to replicate either an F-16 or an
Yep.
F-18 Hornet cockpit.
Yep.
And so one of the things that they have requested is an optics base, a HUD base that's smaller. Currently, our HUD bases are about 8 inches wide for the desktop model and almost 9 inches wide for the cockpit version. So they're fairly good size. And so currently we're designing an SC2 cockpit version, smaller base, about an
Hmm.
inch and a half smaller, utilizing a 6-inch lens. So long story short is because of the feedback and requests that we've had, we've already started on a unit that users with limited space in their cockpit build would
Hmm.
prefer. And so that
That's
and yeah.
no, no. I was going to say that sounds great. I think when you look at cockpit builds versus desktop builds, do you have any requests coming from the desktop build folks?
No, the desktop scenario is kind of it's probably more common with
Hmm.
flight sim enthusiasts. Not everybody builds a cockpit. You know,
Yep.
most users have a gaming setup on their desktops. And we haven't really had any special requests for a desktop version. Usually they're not like a hardcore flight sim enthusiast who's going to go for
Hmm.
the full cockpit type of setup. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Do you have any requests for other software? And again, I'm talking out of turn, but things like Star Citizen or some of the other types of uh, software out there for space games.
So we have had users ask if it's compatible or if it can be used with other software.
Gotcha.
And basically, the answer is it can, as long as you can move images to the add-on monitor
Yep.
uh, in our displays. So if there's a way to, in any particular game or software platform, to actually export some of the imagery, uh, it certainly will take the image. One of the things that is required, I would say the only thing that's required, is actually a black background. So
Hmm.
if there's a space game that has a really cool HUD and you can move it to an add-on monitor,
Yep.
if you can do that with black background, then it'll look great. Yeah,
Oh, very cool.
yeah.
Awesome. So why don't we talk for a second about pricing? So one of the things that my wife complains about is the amount of money that I can spend. But what I found was, I'll let you talk about it, but I found the pricing to be, all things considered, very reasonable for the folks that are getting into
Yeah.
a full
Um,
cockpit build.
so when we decided to pull the trigger on the heads-up display production models for the market, obviously our goal was basically to make sure that we could do it at a price that the average flight sim enthusiast could afford. So we released the desktop model for 795 and the cockpit model, and at some point I'd love to go into the differences, in the cockpit model for 1295. Um, Now we also would like to offer the Air Combat Sim podcast followers a discount. So since we're talking pricing, if you don't mind, basically on our website, if they enter ACS
Hey,
online, we're offering 20% off. So that's like 130 off of the desktop model. And let's see, 20%, what, 200 and something off the cockpit model. But yeah, about 800 for the desktop normal retail and 1295 on the cockpit version.
awesome. Hey, so why don't you take a few minutes and kind of go into the details about and the differences between the two models that you have there?
Sure. So the desktop model is a smaller unit. It's about 8 inches square by 6 inches high. That's the base.
Hmm.
Um, the desktop model is something that has a static HUD collimation distance. So both of these HUDs operate like the real deal, where they collimate the HUD image beyond the unit, behind the rear of the unit. So in a desktop setup, the DT1, the desktop version, was designed to collimate only about 12 inches from the back of the unit. So you've got limited space. Your monitor is going to be, at the back side of your desk. You put this about 12 inches in front of it, and it operates like a real HUD.
Can just quickly for those, including myself, that are not familiar with the word columnate, can
Yes.
you what does that mean?
So think of it as a focal point.
Yep.
These are actually optic systems that create a hologram. The
Mhm.
hologram, the focal point of the hologram is actually not here right at the HUD glass. It's beyond the unit. And
Got it.
that's exactly what you need as a desktop pilot or flight sim enthusiast. So the whole purpose is so that when you're looking at the HUD imagery, you're not focusing your eyes very close and having to refocus at the outside world. So the focal point is moved through the lensing that we use
Yep.
uh, beyond to cast that holographic image about where the monitor is. So the purpose is or the goal is, excuse me, is actually to focus that HUD image at the plane of your monitor so that your eyes don't have to refocus on the HUD versus the outside world.
Got
And
it.
that throwing of the focal point is actually called collimation. So uh, the larger unit, which is the desktop unit, basically it has an adjustable focal point.
Mm.
So it has an internal monitor adjustment, and this thing will allow you to change that focal distance from about 13 inches behind the unit itself, all the way to about 64 inches
Mm.
behind the unit. So let's say you've got this beautiful cockpit build. Your monitor, excuse me, your main screen is maybe 4 feet away, from
Yep.
back of the heads-up display where you position it. So you can actually adjust it with, there's a gauge at the back of the unit, and you simply set it to that point in inches. It calls out inches basically. And that way the throw of that HUD, that collimated distance matches that of your main screen.
Yep. Yep. Totally
Well,
makes sense.
there is another big difference between the two, Rob. The desktop unit uses a 6-inch lens. The HUD glass is approximately the same size on both,
Hmm.
but the viewable area on the desktop unit is going to be somewhat smaller, maybe
Got it.
about 20 to 25% smaller viewable area. And then the cockpit version, it uses a 7-inch lens. So it's a good size, bit bigger. Um, the other difference that we have is the desktop unit has a 45-degree static beam splitter glass. And by the way, both of these units use real beam splitter glass. It has 50 reflective and 50 transmissive properties to it, and it's the real deal as far as combiner or beam splitter glass goes. The cockpit version does have an adjustable tilt angle. So, for example, this particular uh, the cockpit version will adjust from about 38 degrees of tilt
Hmm.
all the way up to about 52 degrees of tilt. So you can adjust that and calibrate it properly for your particular cockpit or simulator setup.
So just to say it a little bit differently, I think there's an expectation with the desktop model that you're going to be able to move it around a bit. Where if you've got it in your cockpit build, your ability to move it's going to be few and far between. So you have more flexibility in the cockpit build to be able to make sure that you can dial that in to exactly have the right expectation.
Exactly. We knew that some cockpit noses are going to slope a little bit downward, so that tilt is going to be very important in
Yep.
aligning the HUD image and specifically the horizon line to match the outside view on your main monitor. So there is a calibration process, and the best way to describe that is by sizing and adjusting the aspect ratio of the HUD image. Once you move it to our internal monitor, you can clearly see the result when you look through the beam splitter glass. But uh, what users need to do is they'll need to position and adjust the size of those HUD windows on this internal monitor so that it looks proper with their particular simulation setup.
Got it. And for the most part, when somebody gets, when it arrives, and clearly if you've got a custom cockpit build, it's going to take you, it'll depend on how long it takes based on your particular setup. But if, for example, I ended up with the desktop model, how long does it normally take for someone to get that set up? Or is that just, it depends on the software?
So it is software dependent. It's a good question. The units themselves are plug and play. So as soon as you plug them in, your operating system recognizes them as an add-on monitor and will show you that in the display properties. You can then position that extra monitor, wherever you desire. As far as setting up the software, if you're using something like FSX or Prepare 3D, for example,
Mhm.
um, including Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, with those types of programs, once you undock a HUD image and you drag and drop it to our internal monitor, sizing and position is very easy. So literally you're using your mouse pointer to click on the corner to drag and create the size that looks correct to you. And then you're using the mouse to position that HUD image where it looks correct. Um, Obviously, you want to align horizons. You want to make sure when you're doing a banking turn that the bank angle of the HUD matches that of the horizon as well. So these are things that adjustments like sizing and positioning will accomplish. So it's relatively easy. The difficult one, and I say difficult, but if you're a DCS user and you're familiar with making changes and adjustments to LUA files and LUA scripts, that one's more complex. So what we've done is we've actually posted for the aircraft we support on DCS, we posted the LUA files for users so they can download those, install them where we instruct them to. And for those aircraft, it will pop out that HUD image to our HUDs. And then as far as making the adjustments, then typically in DCS, it's X and Y coordinates and pixel width and height. So there's 4 adjustments to be made with the heads-up displays in DCS world. The monitor config file in DCS is where those adjustments are made. And again, it's X, Y coordinates and then pixel width and height.
Got it. So for the folks that are interested and say, hey, I primarily fly the F5 and other aircraft in DCS, I think per our previous conversation, you said you are working on them and that some of the other aircraft within DCS, even though they're not available today, that they're in the works.
So currently we've started work on the F-16 HUD, we're exporting it successfully. It's not quite ready yet because we need to remove the image from the main view. So, and it's just a process of experimentation. We have a couple guys who do our software experiments and testing for us, and so that one is pretty close. I'm hoping we can have that ready next month. And then the F-15 just came out. So
Yep.
that's on our radar too, is to get that HUD exported successfully. And then any aircraft with a HUD that doesn't utilize, say, a helmet mount HUD is going to be something that we would love to add to our list of supported aircraft.
Yep. Yeah. And as we think through the, when somebody's going to go down the road and purchase this, it's a scenario where they've said, hey, I'm going to build the most realistic cockpit that isn't necessarily VR. So, and again, kind of talking to the VR piece, that's just a different road where, people are, even now, if I do VR, I have to pull the goggles up to take a look at something. So it's just a different scenario for those folks. So obviously they're going down that road. But if you look at something like the Warthog project, where they've spent an enormous amount of time to build the most detailed replica that they can, that's where something like this is really going to fall in well for them.
And that reminds me, on our one of our goals is to offer bracketing so that you can choose the bracket style for your simulator. So, for example, the Warthog project, ideally, it would be really nice if we could allow customers to pick at the time they purchase, select actually which brackets style they want to use, whether it's A10 or F-16 or F-18 or AV-8B, that type of thing. So that's one of our goals as well, and we're hoping that it actually looks like we'll have bracket options uh, later on this year. I'm saying around November.
If you purchase one tomorrow, for example, let's say you want a bracket, is there something they can do later? And is it that hard to switch it out later if they were to say, hey, I want to get a different bracket?
No, actually, it's a great question, and we realized that some users may want to upgrade to a very specific bracket. So right now we have a standardized bracket in these HUDs here.
Hmm.
Uh, so uh, users will be able to order uh, custom brackets once they are ready,
Hmm.
and the pricing, we're going to try and keep it very reasonable, basically, hopefully around the $50 to $75 mark.
Gotcha. And so, how long does it take, uh, from the time that somebody orders it to the time that it shows up at the doorstep?
So we typically ship within 3 to 4 weeks. Um, we have there. Oh, I just realized that one of the things that the latest upgrades that we've done to all units moving forward is we've increased the brightness of the internal monitors. We've doubled it.
Mm.
So so currently, and I'll get back to your question, but what it's done is it set us back a week or two on some of our orders because we want to include the latest. We've already updated the website, so we want to
Mhm.
make sure that anything we ship from here forward
Yep.
actually has the improved brightness monitors. So these guys are 350 nits or CD per meter squared. It's like a candle power measurement. The new monitors are 600, so they're quite a big improvement over the 350 nits.
Mm.
So typically we do ship orders within 3 to 4 weeks, and we we have a 30-day money back guarantee. So from the date you receive your order, if for any reason you're not satisfied with it, we'll send you an RMA label and you can ship it right back to us for a full refund. We also have a 1 year warranty. So if there's any defect with the LCD monitors or any of the parts, if there's a problem and a defect in manufacturing, you're covered for a year. And again, we'll actually send the return shipping label, and that way we can ship the unit right back to us. We'll either repair or replace it altogether. And that's good for 1 year.
That's awesome. Oh, great. Well, I think we've gone through all my questions. What have we missed? What haven't I asked, or what haven't we covered?
Ah, we have had a lot of requests for exact aircraft HUD block replicas.
Mm.
And one of the things that we tell flight sim enthusiasts who want literally have requested, well, I want the exact F-16 uh, machined
Right.
geometry of, and so one of the things we've gotten quite a few requests for something like that, but um, we tell all of the potential customers the same thing. Those who are looking for replicas, uh, we don't want to drive the price up so high
Hmm.
and have a machined replica done, which would cost probably a few $1,000s
Yep.
just to do something like that. What we want to do is make sure that we have something that is still accessible to the flight sim enthusiast,
Right.
and keep it within a price range that will work with all sim platforms, still look great,
Yep.
and function, well, most importantly, function like a real heads-up display. Um, the other thing that we've been telling those who request replicas is that the HUD blocks themselves, they once installed, they're actually hidden behind the dash visor.
Right.
So you really don't see the HUD block. It's once installed, it's out of view. What
Yep.
you do see is you see the beam splitter and the brackets, and that's why we're moving towards offering some custom bracketing. So that kind of achieves the goal that they're looking for, um, without driving the cost through the roof.
Yep. No, it totally makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. So yeah.
All right. Is it externally powered? Do you need to plug it in?
Oh, good question. So these, the newer monitors which ship with all the units have a 12-volt plug-in at the rear, and the power cable comes with it. The HDMI on the website, you can choose what 10-foot length of cable that you need. So if you have a display port connection on your
Hmm.
video card and that's what you want to use, there's a drop-down menu. You just select which video connection you have, and we'll ship the cable that you need with the unit. And it's 10 feet, so that you've got plenty of length, and you're not fighting with, short cables.
So,
So,
but you don't need the $80 HDMI cable from Best Buy that the guys
no,
are trying to
no,
sell you.
we, we give you the cables that you need with the units.
Got it.
Early on, we decided to not ship the cable because we
Sorry.
didn't, that's okay. Because we, we basically we knew that there were many different video connection types. Some people might have a VGA connector, a 15 pin. Some might have an HDMI. They might want to go USB, something like that. Now, although we don't offer a USB style, we do offer DisplayPort, HDMI, and VGA. And these monitors will take all three connections. We'll ship a 10-foot cable of your choosing with the order. And then the DC 12 volt, we're shipping with an extension cable. The cable originally, it's basically a transformer and a DC connection at the back. I think it's a 2.5 millimeter. And we add a 6-foot extender in the box.
So just finishing up, one of the things that thank you again, Dan, for all the information and for the Air Combat Sim listeners, 20% discount.
Yep.
What's another? How do they? If someone wants this, how do they get it?
So basically, on our website, it's headsupview.com. At checkout, you can enter the promotional code ACSP, as in
Mhm.
Air Combat Sim Podcast, and automatically you'll get a 20% discount off of the entire order.
Got it. And if somebody has questions, they've got a build that they're putting together. Can they contact you directly through the website?
Yeah, we have two methods of contact. So for general questions, inquiries, sales questions, contact admin at headsupview.com. And then for support questions, that would be support at headsupview.com. And typically we respond within a few hours and no more than 24.
Got it. That's awesome. All right. Again, thanks again, Dan, for and apologies for the multiple hiccups that we've had, and I'd like to have you back in a few months when you get the 737 piece and get some pictures of that up on the site and talk about some of the builds that you've done. So I think it'd be great to have an update with you in a few months.
Well, I would look forward to it, Rob, and thanks for having us on the Combat Sim podcast.
Absolutely.